I'm sure by now you all know that if someone stabbed you in the back with a fork and you ignore that piercing pain, it isn't gonna go away. On that same note, when someone is experiencing or living with a severe mental illness, why do we neglect those glaring warning signs like they will simply pass away? And I know that might seem like a big difference. You're probably muttering to yourself, physical pain isn't the same as mental pain. That's what I thought until a few years ago, when one of my family members was hospitalized for psychosis. I remember I would see her and think to myself, you're frightening me, but she hasn't done or said anything that I would be threatened by. Sometimes our first reaction to something alien is fear, hatred, or discrimination. In fact, although many people believe that people with mental health issues are dangerous, they're in fact at a higher risk of harming themselves or being attacked than actually hurting other people. Everything at that time was closed doors, hush, hush, don't tell the others. Ringing in my head were only 3 phrases that were repeated to her like a deadly mantra. Atla alocinchkoku, don't think like that. Atla anaku, don't say that. And just pandako, just sleep. In India, there are 0.75 psychiatrists for every 100,000 populations. That's a country where 60 to 70 million people experience some sort of mental health issue. Some people might say, it's not my problem, he's psychotic. It's not my problem, she's crazy. It's not my problem, they're lazy. It's not my problem until it is. Until it is your loved one, your colleague, your friend, or you. As a society, we have become so desensitized that sometimes we lack basic empathy. Some examples of this is with our language, our casual usage of using mental health words in our daily vocabulary. Like, I'm sure most of you have heard yourself saying, I'm so OCD, or why are you acting so bipolar? Like, take a look at these examples from Twitter and Instagram, and some person says relationships will really give you PTSD. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that happens mostly to war veterans. This type of normalization with vocabulary really undermines the impact of these illnesses. And although you might be thinking that, oh, it's getting more traction to the disorder, it has the complete opposite effect. Now, despite all of that, there is hope for these patients to feel comfortable with their illness and have an easier access with managing their symptoms. How many of you have an Apple Watch, a smartwatch, or fitness tracker, an iPhone? Raise your hands. Okay, wow, that's a lot. So imagine using that smartwatch or that fitness tracker for routine assessment, symptom tracking, and relapse prevention rate for these mental illnesses. Sounds a little impossible, no? A recent 2022 methodical review outlined this very possibility and a prospective business for this very technology. Now, wearables probably will not and could not replace real-time data. So those are the actual patient and doctor interactions. Think of them as fire alarms. Fire alarms alert you to the fire, but they can't actually put out the fire. Just as wearables can alert you to potential mental health issues, but they cannot actually cure such issues. Before I go on, I want to indicate that there's 2 main players in these wearables. And the first one is electrodermal activity. Think of your skin as a silent communicator. It's called electrodermal activity, or EDA, and it's your body's way of speaking without any words. When EDA increases, it shows like a heightened emotional response. So I'm going to focus on schizophrenia for now. Schizophrenia is a serious mental health issue, and it affects the way a person thinks, acts, behaves, and feels. With this, there's positive and negative symptoms. That doesn't mean plus or minus. Positive symptoms add on to the behavior. So these are things like hallucinations or delusions, whereas negative symptoms take away from a person's behavior. So these are the ones that it's like a lack of empathy or lack of emotion, so apathy. With this EDA specifically, there showed that there was an increase in electrodermal activity before positive symptoms occurred. So these patients often were able to sense that there was an increase in this indicator before hallucinations or delusions. So essentially what EDA does, it uncovers our hidden emotions, stress levels, and how our bodies react to life's moments. Our second player is HRV, or heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the time intervals between each of your heartbeats. It's like when your heartbeat goes lub-dub, 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 the space between each lub and dub, that's your heart rate variability. So essentially, your heart beats in a rhythm, but with a twist. You see, your heart doesn't beat like a metronome, it dances to its own tune. With heart rate variability, there showed with psychiatric patients that there was increase in heart rate, so there was lub-dub, 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 but a reduction in the time. So there was a faster heart rate. Instead of a healthy patient that has a regular heartbeat of lub-dub, lub-dub, with psychiatric patients, it was much more heightened. So it was faster, like lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. So with that, there was a study conducted in 2019 where they were able to measure and proof of concept for these exact technology. They were able to prove that wearables did in fact allow to measure behavior and allocate for schizophrenia patients. And they were also able to prove that heart rate variability decreased before the hallucinations or delusions actually occurred. So, think about it big picture-wise. It's like if you were able to save a few seconds or minutes before the psychosis symptoms occurred. So if these schizophrenia patients wore these wearables, they were able to conduct that there was a decrease in the HRV, so they can essentially sense that this is actually helpful in early interventions. So that's like if you see this happening and you can give earlier access and proper care to the right patients. Medication and therapies do help patients with schizophrenia and other psychiatric diseases. However, they often miss important things like environmental factors or preventative measures. Wearables can be those preventative measures as they can detect early warning signs. Like I said before, when they are put on someone, you're able to sense that EDA or HRV. And with that, you can save a few seconds or even a few minutes and give them the proper care. Now, I want to finish off this talk with talking about how to help someone with a mental illness. The first step is do not deny it. The first step is always acceptance. I think if I went back to my 2015 self, this is what I would yell at her. Acceptance is key, and allowing yourself and your loved one to accept it as well are the proper steps to care. The second is observe and listen, 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 listen. Active listening is such a huge skill that is often overlooked. We are so busy with our own things that sometimes we forget what others have to say. I recently learned that there was an 80-20% rule. You do 20% of the talking, whereas the person actually want to be heard does 80% of the talking. So you give them an ear to listen, a non-judgmental ear. And finally, the third is people are people, not their illness. You wouldn't call someone that has cancer, cancer-ric. You would say they have cancer or they live with cancer. So think twice before you call someone a schizophrenic. I want to finish off this talk finally with a quote from Dr. Lloyd Surter. Remember, you are more of a marathon than you're on a sprint. The process of recovery is not straight, and it's certainly not easy. But it is a start. Thank you.